The arrow whistled past Clara's ear, splitting the fabric of her wedding dress sleeve as she dove behind the overturned stagecoach. Her heart hammered against her ribs as another volley of arrows thudded into the wooden side panels, each impact sending splinters flying. The delicate lace of her mail-order bride gown caught on a jagged piece of metal, tearing away a generous strip that left her shoulder bare to the harsh Arizona sun. "Stay down!" shouted Jake Thunder, the half-Apache guide who'd been hired to escort her safely to Willow Creek. His dark eyes flashed with fierce determination as he returned fire with his rifle, his long black hair whipping in the desert wind. Before we continue with Clara's incredible journey, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to help me reach my first 50 subscribers. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more epic Western romance tales. Now let's get back to the story. Clara pressed herself against the splintered wood, acutely aware of how the torn fabric exposed more of her pale skin than any proper lady should show. But propriety seemed laughably insignificant when arrows were flying, and her life hung by a thread. She caught Jake's gaze lingering on her exposed shoulder for just a moment before he snapped his attention back to their attackers. "Renegades," he muttered, his voice a low growl that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine despite the danger. "They're not from my father's tribe. These men have been cast out, desperate and dangerous." The attack had come without warning. One moment Clara had been smoothing her carefully pressed wedding dress and rehearsing what she'd say to Thomas Whitmore, her intended husband whom she'd never met. The next, war cries had split the air and their driver lay motionless in the dust, 3 arrows protruding from his chest. "How many?" Clara whispered, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Back in Boston, she'd never imagined she'd possess such courage, but then again, she'd never imagined she'd flee her comfortable life to marry a stranger in the Arizona territory either. 6, maybe 7, Jake replied, reloading with practiced efficiency. "They want the horses and whatever valuables we're carrying." "But they won't harm you if what?" Clara demanded when he didn't finish. His jaw tightened. "If I give you to them." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She'd heard the stories, the whispered warnings about what happened to white women captured by hostile tribes. But looking at Jake's profile, the sharp planes of his face, the way his muscles tensed as he prepared for another assault, she found herself thinking not of fear, but of the strange safety she felt in his presence. "That's not going to happen," she said firmly, surprising them both. Jake turned to stare at her, something unreadable flickering in his dark eyes. "You might not have a choice, Boston." "Boston?" Despite everything, Clara felt her cheeks flush at the nickname. "That fancy accent of yours. That dress that probably cost more than most folks out here see in a year." His gaze swept over her torn gown again, and Clara felt heat bloom across her exposed skin. "You're a long way from home." Before Clara could respond, another flight of arrows peppered their makeshift shelter. One shaft caught the remaining fabric of her sleeve, pinning her to the coach. As she struggled to free herself, the delicate material gave way entirely, leaving her arm completely bare from shoulder to wrist. Jake's intake of breath was audible. "Clara." The way he said her name, rough and low, sent warmth spiraling through her belly. She'd never heard her name spoken like that, as if it were something precious and dangerous all at once. "Help me," she whispered, not entirely sure if she meant help her free the fabric or help her understand the way her body was responding to his proximity. Jake moved closer, his calloused fingers working to untangle the caught material. His touch was surprisingly gentle, but Clara could feel the controlled strength in his hands. When he accidentally brushed her bare shoulder, she gasped softly. "Your skin," he murmured, his thumb tracing the pale expanse where the sun had never touched. "It's like silk." Clara's breath caught. She'd been touched before, polite handshakes, chaste kisses on the cheek. But nothing had ever felt like this. Nothing had ever made her feel like she was burning from the inside out. "Jake?" A war cry interrupted her words, closer this time. Jake immediately shifted, placing his body between Clara and the approaching danger, his broad shoulders blocking her view of the desert beyond. "They're moving," he said, tension radiating from every line of his frame. getting ready for a final charge. What do we do? Jake was quiet for a long moment, his rifle steady in his hands. There's a canyon about a mile west of here. If we can reach it, there are caves where we can hide until help comes. But the horses are dead or scattered. Jake's voice was grim. We go on foot, and we go now. He turned to face her fully, and Clara saw something in his expression that made her pulse race. Determination, yes, but also something deeper. Something that looked almost like possessiveness. Stay close to me, he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. And Clara, don't let go of my hand, no matter what happens. Before Clara could ask what he meant, Jake grabbed her hand and pulled her to her feet. The sudden movement caused more of her damaged dress to tear away, the sound of rending fabric loud in the desert air. Clara looked down to see that the skirt was now shredded from mid-thigh down, her legs visible through the gaps in the ruined silk. I can't run like this, she protested, acutely aware of how much skin she was showing. Jake's eyes darkened as his gaze traveled over her exposed legs, her torn bodice, the wild tangle of her blonde hair that had escaped its proper pins. You can, and you will, he said fiercely, because the alternative is unthinkable. They burst from behind the overturned coach at a dead run, Jake's hand iron-strong around Clara's wrist. Behind them, war cries erupted as their attackers spotted their escape. Clara's lungs burned as she struggled to keep pace with Jake's long strides, her torn skirts tangling around her legs with every step. Faster, Jake urged, pulling her along when she stumbled. The canyon, just ahead. Clara could see it now, a dark slash in the red rock face. Sanctuary if they could reach it. But the pursuing hoofbeats were getting closer, and she could feel her strength failing. The heavy fabric of her wedding dress, even torn as it was, wasn't made for running across desert terrain. Jake, she panted. I can't. Without warning, he swept her up into his arms, carrying her the final 100 yards to the canyon entrance. Clara found herself pressed against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart, breathing in the intoxicating scent of leather and sage, and something uniquely masculine. Hold on, he murmured against her hair, and Clara wrapped her arms around his neck, allowing herself this one moment of complete surrender. They plunged into the shadowy coolness of the canyon, just as the first arrows began striking the rock walls behind them. Jake didn't slow his pace, navigating the narrow passage with sure feet despite the dim light. Finally, he ducked into a hidden alcove and set Clara gently on her feet. Are we safe? She whispered, her voice echoing softly off the stone walls. For now. Jake moved to the entrance of their hiding place, peering out at the main canyon. They'll search for a while, but they won't venture too deep. This place has significance for Apache. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how cold it was in the shadows after the desert heat. Her torn dress provided little warmth, and she shivered involuntarily. Jake noticed immediately. Without a word, he shrugged out of his leather vest and draped it around her shoulders. The garment was still warm from his body heat, and Clara couldn't suppress a soft sigh of relief. Better? He asked, his voice gentler than she'd heard it before. Yes, thank you. Clara pulled the vest tighter, inhaling the scent of him that clung to the leather. Jake, what you said before, about giving me to them, you wouldn't really. No. His answer was immediate and absolute. I'd die first. The fierce certainty in his voice made Clara's knees weak. But you barely know me. Jake moved closer, close enough that Clara had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. I know enough, he said quietly. I know you left everything familiar to start a new life. I know you have courage. Most women would have fainted dead away during that attack. And I know. What? Clara whispered when he trailed off. I know that from the moment I saw you step off that stage this morning, I haven't been able to think about anything but you. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. Jake, you can't say things like that. I'm promised to another man. Thomas Whitmore. Jake's voice hardened. A man who's never even seen you, who ordered you like a piece of merchandise from a catalog. It's not like that, Clara protested, though even as she said the words, she wondered if they were true. It's practical, beneficial for both of us. What about what you want, Clara? Jake stepped closer still, his hands coming up to rest on her shoulders. Through the thin leather of his vest, she could feel the heat of his palms. What about what you need? Loving the tension between these characters? Hit that like button and subscribe. I'm on a mission to reach 50 subscribers, and you can help me get there. Every subscription counts. Now let's see what happens next. Clara stared up at him, her mind reeling. What did she want? For months she'd told herself that security was enough, that companionship was sufficient. But standing here in Jake's arms, feeling more alive than she'd ever felt in her 23 years, she began to understand that she'd been lying to herself. I want, she began, then stopped, afraid to voice the dangerous thoughts filling her head. Tell me, Jake urged, his thumb stroking softly across her collarbone. I want to feel like I did when you carried me, she whispered, the confession torn from her lips. Safe and wild and alive. Jake's eyes flared with heat. Clara. Before either of them could think better of it, Jake's mouth descended on hers. The kiss was nothing like the chaste pecks Clara had received from suitable Boston gentlemen. This was fire and hunger and desperate need. Jake's lips were firm and demanding, and when Clara opened her mouth on a gasp of surprise, his tongue swept inside to claim her completely. Clara had never been kissed like this, had never imagined such intimacy was possible. Her hands fisted in Jake's shirt, pulling him closer as her body came alive with sensations she'd never dreamed existed. When Jake's hands tangled in her hair, scattering the last of her pins, she moaned softly into his mouth. The sound seemed to inflame him further. He backed her against the stone wall of the alcove, his body pressing intimately against hers. Clara could feel every hard plane of his chest, the strength in his arms as he caged her in. But she didn't feel trapped. She felt cherished, desired, claimed in the most fundamental way. This is madness, she breathed against his lips when they finally broke apart. Yes, Jake agreed, his forehead resting against hers. But I can't seem to care. They stood there for long moments, breathing hard, acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. Clara's hands had somehow found their way to Jake's chest, and she could feel his heart racing beneath her palms. Tell me about him, Jake said finally. This man you're supposed to marry. Clara's stomach twisted with guilt, but she forced herself to answer. Thomas owns the largest ranch in Willow Creek. He's established, respectable. Do you love him? The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Clara wanted to lie, knew she should lie, but found herself incapable of deception under Jake's intense gaze. I've never even met him, she admitted. Our correspondence was, practical, arrangements, expectations, financial considerations. That's not what I asked. No, Clara whispered. I don't love him. I'm not sure I'm capable of loving him. Jake's hands cupped her face with infinite gentleness. You're capable of more than you know, Boston. More passion, more fire than any man deserves. Including you? The question slipped out before Clara could stop it. Jake's smile was slow and devastating. Especially me. Before Clara could ask what he meant, a sound echoed through the canyon, a low, haunting whistle that seemed to come from the very stones around them. Clara tensed, memories of the attack flooding back. What was that? Jake had gone very still, his head cocked to listen. The whistle came again, a complex pattern of notes that meant nothing to Clara but clearly held significance for Jake. It's not them, he said after a moment, relief evident in his voice. It's my brother. Your brother? Half-brother, technically. Samuel Windwalker. He must have seen the smoke from the attacked coach. Jake moved to the entrance of their hiding place and returned the whistle call with one of his own. Within minutes, Clara heard the soft sound of moccasins on stone, and then a figure appeared at the mouth of their alcove. The newcomer was clearly related to Jake, the same strong bone structure, the same dark eyes. But where Jake wore the clothes of a frontier guide, this man was dressed in traditional Apache clothing. Samuel's gaze swept over Clara with frank curiosity, taking in her disheveled state and the way she was wrapped in Jake's vest. He said something in rapid Apache that made Jake stiffen. "English, Samuel. The lady doesn't speak our language." Samuel's eyebrows rose slightly. "The lady. This is the mail-order bride you were hired to escort?" Heat flooded Clara's cheeks at the clinical description, but Jake's jaw tightened dangerously. "This is Clara," he said, his voice carrying a warning, "and she's under my protection." Something passed between the two men. Some wordless communication that Clara couldn't interpret. Finally, Samuel nodded slowly. "The renegades are gone," he reported. "They took what they could from the coach and left, but they may return with more men. This area has become dangerous for travelers. Then we need to get Clara to safety." "To Willow Creek?" Samuel asked. "To her intended husband?" Again, that loaded silence. Clara found herself holding her breath, waiting for Jake's answer. "We'll discuss it," Jake said finally. Samuel's dark eyes moved between them again, and Clara had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing far too much. "There is an old cabin about 5 miles from here," he said eventually. "It belonged to a trapper, but he abandoned it last winter. You could shelter there tonight. Decide what to do in the morning. And the woman?" Samuel's gaze settled on Clara with something that might have been pity. "What of her reputation? Her commitments? If you're loving this tale so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. I'm working hard to reach 50 subscribers, and every single one of you makes a difference. Help me grow this channel. Now back to Clara." Clara lifted her chin, some spark of rebellion flickering to life in her chest. "I can speak for myself," she said firmly. "And right now, my primary concern is staying alive, not maintaining the appearance of propriety." Samuel's eyes glinted with what might have been approval. "She has spirit, this one." "Yes," Jake said quietly, his gaze fixed on Clara's face. "She does." The weight of his attention made Clara's pulse flutter, but she forced herself to focus on practical matters. "This cabin, is it safe?" "Safer than staying here," Samuel replied. "I can guide you there, then return to our father's camp. If anyone comes looking, I saw nothing." "Thank you," Clara said, meaning it. "I'm grateful for your help." Samuel nodded gravely. Any woman brave enough to travel this far from home to start a new life deserves assistance when she needs it. As they prepared to leave the canyon, Jake helped Clara adjust his vest for better coverage. His hands lingered at her shoulders, his touch sending warmth spiraling through her despite the gravity of their situation. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Once we leave here, there's no going back. People will talk, make assumptions." Clara thought about Thomas Whitmore, waiting for his ordered bride who might never arrive. She thought about the life she'd planned, safe and predictable and utterly without passion. Then she looked at Jake, dangerous, magnificent Jake, who made her feel like she was burning from the inside out, and made her choice. "I'm sure," she said. The journey to the cabin took them through terrain that seemed designed to test Clara's resolve. Her torn skirts caught on every thorn bush and cactus, leaving her legs even more exposed. By the time they reached their destination, the sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The cabin was small but sturdy, with thick stone walls and a heavy wooden door. Samuel checked the interior thoroughly before declaring it safe. "There's a well out back," he reported, and the previous owner left some supplies: coffee, beans, salt pork, enough to last a few days. "We won't need that long," Jake said, but Samuel gave him a look that suggested otherwise. "Perhaps not," Samuel agreed diplomatically. "I'll return in 3 days to check on you. If you're not here, I'll know you've moved on." After Samuel left, Clara found herself alone with Jake for the first time since their kiss. The cabin felt impossibly intimate, the single room dominated by a large fireplace and a narrow bed covered with rough blankets. "I can sleep on the floor," Jake said quickly, following her gaze. "That's not necessary." Clara's voice was steadier than she felt. "We're both adults. We can share the space like civilized people." Jake's laugh was rough. "Civilized is the last thing I feel around you, Boston." The endearment sent heat curling through Clara's belly. "Then what do you feel?" Jake turned to face her fully, his eyes dark with an emotion she was beginning to recognize. "Hungry," he said simply. "Like I've been starving my whole life and didn't know it until I saw you." Clara's breath caught. "Jake, I know your promise to another man," he continued, moving closer. "I know I have no right to feel this way. But Clara, when I thought those renegades might take you, something inside me broke." "You barely know me," Clara whispered, even as her body swayed toward his. "I know that you're braver than any woman I've ever met. I know that when you kiss me, the rest of the world stops existing. I know that the thought of you marrying Thomas Whitmore makes me want to put my fist through a wall." Each word was like a flame against Clara's skin. She'd never inspired such passion in anyone, had never even known it was possible. The Clara who'd left Boston would have been scandalized by such frank emotion. But standing here in this remote cabin with this magnificent man, she found that the proper young lady she'd once been was fading like smoke. "What are you saying?" she asked. Jake's hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs stroking over her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. "I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you, Clara. Fast and hard and completely against my better judgment." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. Love? She'd thought love was quiet affection, respectful companionship, shared goals and values. She'd never imagined it could be this consuming fire that threatened to burn her alive. "That's impossible," she breathed. "Is it?" Jake's mouth hovered just inches from hers. "Then tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me that when I touch you like this, you don't feel like you're coming alive for the first time." As if to prove his point, Jake's hand slid down to her waist, pulling her against him. Clara could feel every hard plane of his body, the controlled strength in his arms, the rapid beat of his heart. Her own pulse was racing, her skin hypersensitive to every point of contact. Clara started to deny it, then stopped. What was the point of lying when her body was betraying her so completely? "I don't understand what's happening to me." "You're awakening," Jake murmured, his lips brushing her temple. "Finally becoming the woman you were meant to be." His words sent a shiver down Clara's spine. Was that what this was? Some kind of awakening? She thought of the careful plans she'd made, the practical arrangements, the safe, predictable life she'd been moving toward. All of it seemed colorless now, like a photograph compared to the vivid reality of Jake's touch. "I'm frightened," she admitted. "Of me. Of myself. Of how you make me feel." Jake pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes soft with understanding. "There's nothing to be frightened of, Clara. This is natural, what happens between a man and a woman when they truly connect." "Is it? Because I've never felt anything like this before." "Neither have I," Jake confessed, and the admission sent warmth flooding through Clara's chest. "You think I make a habit of falling for mail-order brides I'm hired to escort?" Despite everything, Clara smiled. "I certainly hope not. Only you, Boston. Only ever you." The certainty in his voice was like a balm to Clara's fears. She found herself relaxing into his embrace, allowing herself to feel the pull between them without trying to analyze or resist it. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we build a fire and have some food. We rest and recover from today's ordeal." Jake's hands traced gentle circles on her back. "And tomorrow, we decide what comes next. Together? If that's what you want." Clara looked up at this man who'd already turned her world upside down. This complicated, dangerous, utterly captivating man who made her feel things she'd never imagined possible. The safe choice would be to insist he take her to Willow Creek in the morning, to honor her commitment to Thomas Whitmore despite everything that had happened. But as she met Jake's steady gaze, Clara realized she was tired of safe choices. "Together," she said. Jake's smile was like sunrise, brilliant and full of promise. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of tenderness that brought tears to Clara's eyes. When they broke apart, she felt fundamentally changed, as if some essential part of her had been waiting for this moment her entire life. "I'll get the fire started," Jake said, his voice rough with emotion. As he moved away to tend to practical matters, Clara sank onto the narrow bed and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning, she'd been a proper young lady traveling to meet her intended husband. Now she was a half-dressed woman hiding in a remote cabin with a man who claimed to be falling in love with her. The old Clara would have been horrified, but as she watched Jake build their fire with efficient, graceful movements, Clara found she couldn't summon even a shred of regret. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. Over a simple meal of beans and coffee, they talked. Jake told her about his childhood caught between two worlds, his Apache father's tribe and his Irish mother's people. Clara shared stories of Boston society, the suffocating restrictions and endless expectations that had driven her west. "No wonder you answered Whitmore's advertisement," Jake said when she finished describing a particularly stifling social season. "Must have seemed like freedom compared to all that." "It did," Clara admitted. "Though now I'm beginning to think I had no idea what real freedom could look like." "What does it look like?" Clara met his eyes across the flickering firelight. "Like this. Like being able to say what I think, feel what I feel, without worrying about propriety or expectations." "And what do you feel, Clara?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. Clara thought about deflecting, giving some safe, non-committal answer. Instead, she chose honesty. "I feel like I'm standing at the edge of a cliff," she said. "And for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid to jump. We're getting to the most intense part of the story. If you're hooked, show your support by hitting like and subscribe. Help me reach 50 subscribers so I can keep bringing you these passionate Western romances. Let's continue." Jake's eyes darkened at her words. He set down his coffee cup and moved to sit beside her on the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. "And if you jump?" he asked softly. "I don't know," Clara admitted, "but I think you'll catch me." "Always," Jake promised, his hand coming up to stroke her cheek. "For as long as you'll let me." Clara leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. "Jake, what we're doing, it changes everything. I know. I can't go back to who I was before today." "Would you want to?" Clara opened her eyes to find Jake watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "No," she whispered. "I wouldn't." "Then don't," Jake said simply. "Stay with me, Clara. Not because you have to, not because it's practical or expected, but because you want to." "I do want to," Clara confessed, the words seeming to unlock something deep inside her chest. "More than I've ever wanted anything." Jake's response was to kiss her again, deeper this time, with a passion that left Clara breathless and aching. His hands tangled in her hair as he mapped the curve of her lips, the line of her jaw, the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. Clara had never known such exquisite torment existed. Every touch of Jake's lips sent fire racing through her veins. Every caress awakened new sensations she'd never imagined. When he pressed soft kisses to the exposed skin of her throat, she arched against him with a soft moan. "Clara," Jake breathed against her skin, his voice rough with want. "Tell me to stop." "I can't," she gasped, her hands fisting in his shirt. "I don't want you to stop." Jake pulled back to look at her, searching her face in the firelight. "Are you sure once we cross this line?" "I'm sure," Clara interrupted, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "I've never been more sure of anything." That was all the permission Jake needed. His mouth claimed hers again, and this time there was nothing gentle or tentative about the kiss. It was pure claiming, raw hunger given voice. Clara met him passion for passion, her body responding with an eagerness that might have shocked her if she'd been capable of coherent thought. Jake's hands found the remaining pins in her hair, pulling them free until the golden mass tumbled around her shoulders. He buried his fingers in the silky strands, using his grip to angle her head for deeper access to her mouth. "So beautiful," he murmured against her lips. "From the moment I saw you, I've wanted to see your hair like this, wanted to touch it, taste it." His words sent liquid heat pooling in Clara's belly. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such frank appreciation for her body. She'd been taught to think of physical desire as something base, something to be endured rather than enjoyed. But with Jake's hands on her skin and his voice rough with want, she was beginning to understand that she'd been taught lies. "Jake," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for, but knowing she needed more. "I know, sweetheart, I know." His endearment sent fresh warmth cascading through her. Sweetheart. When he called her that, she felt precious, cherished, desired for herself rather than her connections or her dowry. Jake's hands moved to the ties of his vest, which she still wore. With infinite patience, he worked the leather lacings free, his knuckles brushing against her skin with each movement. Clara's breath came in shallow pants as the garment fell away, leaving her in just her torn chemise and the remains of her corset. "Clara," Jake's voice was strained as his gaze swept over her exposed skin. "You're perfect." Clara wanted to protest. She knew her body wasn't perfect, had catalogued every flaw in her mirror back in Boston. But the reverence in Jake's eyes made her feel like a goddess, powerful and beautiful and utterly desirable. When Jake's mouth moved to the curve of her shoulder, pressing hot, open-mouthed kisses to her skin, Clara thought she might die from the pleasure of it. She'd never known her body was capable of such sensation, had never imagined that a man's touch could make her feel like she was dissolving from the inside out. "Please," she gasped, though she wasn't sure what she was begging for. Jake seemed to understand anyway. His hands moved to the laces of her corset, his fingers working with surprising dexterity to free her from the confining garment. When it fell away, leaving her in only her thin chemise, Clara felt simultaneously vulnerable and empowered. "Beautiful," Jake breathed, his hands skimming over the thin cotton that was now her only barrier. "So damn beautiful." Clara's hands moved to his shirt, suddenly desperate to feel his skin against hers. Jake helped her pull the garment over his head, and Clara's breath caught at the sight of his bare chest. He was magnificent, all lean muscle and golden skin marked by old scars that spoke of a hard life lived fully. "Your turn to look," Jake said softly, standing still under her exploration. Clara's hands trembled as she traced the contours of his chest, fascinated by the play of muscle under smooth skin. When her fingers brushed over a particularly sensitive spot, Jake's sharp intake of breath made her feel drunk with power. "Clara," he groaned, catching her hands in his. "If you keep touching me like that, I won't be able to be gentle. Maybe I don't want gentle," Clara surprised herself by saying. "Maybe I want to feel everything." Jake's eyes flared with heat. "You don't know what you're asking for." "Then show me," Clara challenged, meeting his gaze boldly. "Show me what it means to be with a man who wants me, not just the idea of me." Jake's control snapped. He pulled Clara hard against him, claiming her mouth in a kiss that was pure fire and demand. Clara met him eagerly, her body coming alive under his hands as he explored every curve, every sensitive hollow. When Jake's mouth moved to her throat, then lower to the swell of her breasts above her chemise, Clara cried out softly. The sound seemed to inflame him further, and suddenly they were moving together, sinking onto the narrow bed in a tangle of limbs and desperate kisses. Clara had never imagined such intimacy was possible. Every touch of Jake's hands, every press of his lips against her skin, sent waves of sensation crashing through her. When he whispered her name like a prayer, she felt tears prick her eyes at the sheer beauty of it. "I love you," she whispered against his mouth, the words emerging without conscious thought. "Jake, I love you." Jake went very still above her, his dark eyes searching her face in the firelight. "Clara, I know it's crazy," she rushed on. "I know we've only known each other for one day, but I love you. I love your strength and your gentleness and the way you make me feel like I'm finally awake after a lifetime of sleeping." Jake's response was to kiss her with such tender reverence that Clara felt her heart might burst. "I love you too," he said against her lips, "more than life itself." They made love slowly, tenderly, Jake guiding Clara through each new sensation with infinite patience. When she cried out at the moment of joining, he held her close and whispered endearments against her hair, until the pain faded into something else entirely. something that built and built until Clara thought she might shatter from the intensity of it. Afterwards, they lay entwined in the narrow bed, Clara's head pillowed on Jake's chest as she listened to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. She felt fundamentally changed, as if she'd been reborn in Jake's arms. "No regrets?" Jake asked softly, his fingers combing through her hair. "None," Clara said firmly. "You? How could I regret the best thing that's ever happened to me?" Clara smiled, pressing a kiss to his chest. "So what happens now?" "Now you decide what kind of life you want," Jake said. "I can take you to Willow Creek if that's what you choose. I won't like it, but I'll do it. And if I don't choose that, then we build something new together. It won't be easy. People will talk, make judgments. But Clara, if you're willing to be brave one more time." "Yes," Clara said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes, yes." Jake's arms tightened around her. "Are you sure? You'd be giving up security, respectability. I'd be gaining everything that matters," Clara interrupted. "Love, passion, a life lived fully instead of safely. It might be dangerous. My world isn't always safe." Clara thought of the attack that morning, the arrows and the fear and the way Jake had protected her without hesitation. "Then we'll face the danger together." "Together," Jake agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. They talked through the night, making plans for a future neither had imagined that morning. They would travel to California, Jake decided, where his mixed heritage would be less of an issue, and Clara's unconventional choice would be just another story, in a land full of people seeking new starts. As dawn painted the desert in shades of rose and gold, Clara stood at the cabin's small window, wrapped in Jake's arms and wearing his shirt over her chemise. In the distance, she could hear birdsong and the whisper of wind through the canyons. "Listen," Jake murmured against her hair. "Do you hear that?" Clara cocked her head, focusing on the sounds drifting through the morning air. There, a low, musical whistling that seemed to dance on the breeze. "What is it?" she asked. "My people believe it's the sound the earth makes when it's happy," Jake explained, "when all is as it should be." Clara smiled, leaning back against Jake's solid warmth. "Then I hope it never stops." 3 days later, Samuel Windwalker arrived at the cabin to find it empty, except for a note written in Jake's careful hand. "Gone to build a new life. Tell anyone who asks that Clara Morrison died in the attack, along with her guide. Some stories are too precious to share with the world." Samuel smiled as he tucked the note into his shirt. His brother had always been the romantic of the family. In the distance, he could hear that whistling sound again, the earth singing its ancient song of joy. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please smash that like button and subscribe to help me reach my goal of 50 subscribers. Your support helps me create more amazing Western romance stories for you. What did you think of this story? Let me know in the comments below. In the town of Willow Creek, Thomas Whitmore waited 3 more days before accepting that his mail-order bride wasn't coming. The sheriff found the attacked stagecoach and reported that all passengers had been killed or taken. Thomas mourned briefly for the woman he'd never met, then placed a new advertisement in the Boston papers. But far to the west, in a valley where wildflowers bloomed and streams ran clear, a woman who'd once been called Clara Morrison learned what it meant to truly live. And sometimes, when the wind was right and the desert sang its ancient songs, travelers passing through would swear they could hear the sound of laughter carried on the breeze, wild and free and utterly joyful.